Thanks, everybody. So the interesting thing was when they had first approached me to write a book, I was nervous and hesitant to do it because I work in digital media, and the half-life for any of our content is like 12 hours, basically. But ultimately, glad I decided to write a book, and excited for you all to hear about my case for voting for Joe Biden. They said it would be fine. They said nothing would be obsolete. And here we are.
Yeah, I don't know how we ended up. When we were thinking about writing a book, John Lovett always said that says that writing is the old economy. And he's like, why would we write anything? We can just talk into a microphone.
Yeah.
But you know what? Now we've got a New York Times bestselling author right here on stage with us.
Well, thank you. We've also got a New York Times bestselling author here, so.
Yeah, who knows? We'll give it to anyone. So I have followed Brian's incredibly impressive career for a long time now. I've been a fan for a long time, but then over the last couple years, I got to know him because he does a YouTube show with my co-host and co-founder Tommy Vitor called Liberal Tears, which, as far as I can tell, is just sort of you and Tommy hazing each other.
Yeah.
That basically the show, you rank things and then you haze each other.
We rank things. It's basically my excuse to torture Tommy. Basically, we have to rank anything. We rank the top 10 worst politicians, the top 10 worst Republicans, worst convention moments, and then whoever wins the ranking, wins the draft, has to haze the other person, punish the other person. And Tommy's punishments are so tame and gentle. And my first punishment for Tommy was that he had to get a Mike Pence 2020 tramp stamp on his lower back.
I was in my office and I walk into the studio, and it's like one of my first experiences with just really hanging out with Brian. I walk into the studio and there's Brian just putting a tramp stamp on the back of Tommy's back, on the lower back, just says Mike Pence. I was like, oh, interesting. This is a cool collaboration we're doing together.
It's fun, too, for Tommy, because he was the National Security Council spokesman.
Yes.
And then cut to, 5 years later, me putting a temporary tattoo on his lower back. So.
Okay, so I want to start with sort of how you got to where you are right now. You were an actor originally who started getting involved in politics, I think, around 2018.
Yeah.
Talk to us about those early days. Like, what got you involved, and sort of, why'd you make the leap?
So, moved out here to be an actor. My my first job was at Equinox West Hollywood at the front desk, and I specifically wanted to work nights so that I can write articles about politics freehand, because there was no computers. We just sat at the desk and ostensibly would check people in, although I worked at night and I wanted to write, and so I didn't care who walked into the gym. So if you were an Equinox member between 2016 and 2019, you definitely want to come in between 5:30 and 10:30 because you don't even need a membership. Because I would just be standing there writing my articles freehand. I would take them, go home, type them up, and submit them to HuffPost. And I just loved it. I loved politics. And also, the thing about the entertainment industry, and I'm sure people here have some relationship to the industry, is that you have to wait for a lot of people to give you permission to do whatever it is you want to do. Tens or hundreds of people have to say yes before you can advance anywhere. And that sucked. And so I wanted to kind of be in charge of my own career, and luckily with content creation, you can do that. And so I started shooting my own videos, basically, and putting them onto Facebook. And Facebook was really the main platform. And then I put them onto YouTube at the same time, and tens of people watched them, and then hundreds of people, and then eventually I hit a critical mass. But it's just a lot of keeping my head down and learning how to make the videos not terrible to the point where I'm at today.
So have you always been into politics, and you had always wanted to do something in politics and write, or?
I don't think I always wanted to do something in politics. I always wanted to do something in the industry, actually. That was my goal for a long time, was to work in the entertainment industry. But I've always been passionate about politics, and I didn't think that I could actually do anything with it. But I remember when I started doing YouTube videos and acting, my political videos and acting at the same time, and the speed with which acting felt so inconsequential. Like, there's something about doing YouTube videos during the Trump era and watching like democracy crumble and then going in for a Cars.com commercial that just really
Wasn't as fulfilling for you?
exacerbated the extent to which it was like, I don't think I can do this anymore. And I remember after like going in for some like Doritos commercial or something, I called my agent on the way out and I was like, I think I can't do this ever again.
When you first started your YouTube channel, like, did you have a theory of the case? Like, how did you decide what to post, how often to post, what you wanted to say, and like what would differentiate you and the content you were posting?
So I didn't really think about my branding, and that's like a big thing. Everyone's like, "What's your brand?" I was like, I don't know. I don't know Like, I don't know what my brand is. But I think what I wanted to do was kind of rebut right-wing disinformation, because a lot of what I was being served, especially on Facebook at the time, there were no left-of-center commentators. It was just right-wing videos like coming at me from every which way, and there was nothing on the left. And I had a little bit of experience in front of the camera, and so I was like, I'll just do it. I'll just start putting stuff out there and see how it does. But it wasn't until the video started catching on that I realized that there was really a dearth in that kind of content, and giving people just bite-sized responses to really basic right-wing talking points, right-wing narratives, and that's kind of been the approach all along. And I think the other side of that, so there's the combating right-wing disinformation, and then just more generally making politics as accessible as I could. And that was, I think that's just born out of the fact that I don't have a background in DC, and so for me to understand something would have to be in layman's terms enough that I would get it, so that other people would get it too inherently.
So in Shameless, which is just a fantastic book, you tell the origin story of the current MAGA iteration of the Republican Party, though it's an origin story that starts well before Trump. Can you talk a little bit about what that story is and where did it start?
Yeah, so it started actually, well, I think it starts in a few different places. I think the person in Congress most responsible would probably be Newt Gingrich. And I think he was responsible for a lot of like the acrimony in politics as we see it today. He had a list of words that he would use to describe Democrats, which are a lot of the words that we know today. I don't have the list in front of me, but it's in the book. He was the one responsible for telling a lot of the Republican members to go home on the weekends, because he didn't like the fact that by virtue of being in DC, the members could foster relationships with members on the other side of the aisle. They can't have that, because then there would be a degree of like symbiotic like cooperation. Can't possibly have that.
So bipartisanship to break out.
Can't have like a rash of a spell of bipartisanship happen. Right. So that's really where it came about. I mean, he's still very active on the right, but I think in large part it was Newt Gingrich. On the media side, Roger Ailes worked for Richard Nixon, saw what happened to Nixon in 1974, where there was no media backup to basically serve as a protective shield against a criminal Republican president. And so he created the Ailes memo, which would eventually become what Fox News is today. And the natural conclusion of that is 50 years after Nixon resigned because of Watergate, we have another Republican criminal president who did something way worse than Watergate, and not only was he not excommunicated from the party, but they rallied around him, and he's the Republican nominee for president now. So this is the realization of what Roger Ailes sought to do, and to their credit, Republicans are very good about laying down their plans and seeing them out, seeing them realized over the course of years or decades.
I thought it was so interesting in the book. You talked about that Ailes memo, just him being so open about what the plan was. There's not a lot of like hiding it at that point. This was like in 1970. He did this memo. Could you give us a little taste of what the memo was like?
Yeah, I mean, it was basically him. I mean, it was basically him saying that we need to
control the media.
We need to control the media. Yeah, I mean, it was him looking and seeing that the media was too overtly liberal for his taste, and that there needs to be a Republican answer to that. And even today, you look at how the media comports itself in the aftermath of that, which is basically bending over backwards to prove to the right, to prove to the Fox Newses of the world that it's not liberal, and so that's how we end up with 69 cover stories about Hillary's emails.
Yeah. What did you learn over the course of writing the book and just throughout your time in politics about how and why right-wing media works?
I think the most important thing is, well, there is an asymmetry at play with right-wing media, and that is that right-wing media is overtly aligned with the Republican Party, and what we would call legacy media, mainstream media, what they would call the liberal media, is like overtly hostile to being associated with the Democratic Party, and that asymmetry would never be corrected because the left, the mainstream media always wanted to always distance itself from the left, and so they could always lean into that difference, and basically, you would have the Foxes and Newsmax and OANs and Steve Bannon's show and Alex Jones's show that could do overt right-wing propaganda, knowing full well that if the left didn't, or the mainstream media didn't take its cues from the right, that they would be branded the liberal media, and so there was always that asymmetry at play, and the right was very good about embracing independent media sources as well, and Trump was really good about this too, about laying hands on any outlet that would basically confer upon him positive coverage, and it validated a lot of outlets, and the left never really did that because we always viewed CNN, ABC, NBC, CBS as enough for us, even though, again, these people will bend over backwards trying to prove that they're not liberal. And so, again, it just exacerbated that asymmetry. And now, finally, all the way up to most recently at the DNC, we've seen the left realize very quickly how important it is to embrace independent media, progressive media that actually isn't afraid to, doesn't run away from progressive values or democratic values, but we created this huge gap that we have to overcome because there are a lot of really big validated outlets on the right and not that many on the left.
Something I've wrestled with for a while is how much of the power of right-wing media is a supply issue or a demand issue, meaning how much of it is if you watch a lot of right-wing media, it can make you become more conservative and more right-wing because of what you're watching and because more propaganda, and how much is that they are finding an audience of people who are already sort of conservative or sort of willing to or looking for what they're offering.
Well, there's different jump-in points, right? So you have basically gateway figures on the right. Who's a mild figure on the right that would be the gateway?
Well,
the
even
gateway
a
drug.
Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah, exactly. A lot for these young guys who Nelk boys, for these young men in America.
Theo Vaughn.
Right. That's who they'll get into right-wing comedy, and the way that the algorithms work is the next thing that you'll be served is a suggestion for something a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole. Cut to 6 months later, you're talking about the frogs being gay on Alex Jones's show.
Yeah.
And
happens pretty fast.
Happens pretty fast. It's a steep descent down the
rabbit hole.
Elon
Musk.
Yeah. I mean, you look at someone like Elon Musk, and dude red-pilled himself.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
No. I always think about that too. Is that what's changed, right, from the age of when people were just watching Fox and Fox News, is now the algorithms actually can push you, or at least offer you different pathways, and that becomes sort of harder to avoid because you're oh, I like that, I'm going to read that, I'm going to read that.
Yeah, I mean, it's powerful. I mean, there's a reason that Elon Musk bought Twitter because he recognizes how important media is in terms of crafting or molding everybody's political persuasion, ideology in this country.
Yeah. You talked to a number of really smart people for the book, my co-host Dan Pfeiffer, and one thing Dan said in your book that he talks about all the time is, Democrats, over the years, people think Democrats are bad at messaging, but there's actually a lot of work done in the Democratic Party to figure out what the message is, but there's not as much work, or traditionally there hasn't been as much work to figure out how the message is delivered and how it gets to people, because we are no longer in the age of like politicians giving a speech or putting out a press release. And then, also Dan was saying that Democrats think, okay, here's the message, and now if I deliver the message to CNN or the New York Times or the Washington Post, it's just gonna get to people.
Yeah.
And the right realized long ago that that's not a good way to get their message to people. And I think Democrats have been, frustrated at times that like the message isn't delivered better, but also it's like, their job is not to elect Democrats, the media, right? They're not supposed to be on our team.
Correct.
And so it has been this, and you've come to this realization as well, where it's if we want to deliver our message in a very fractured media environment like the one we live in right now, we have to find these independent and fund and create these independent sources of media to get our message out.
Yeah, I mean, Dan's point is that Democrats spend so much time crafting the perfect message, getting the perfect messengers, and building these ads. Everything has to be perfect, and then we hand it to media entities that aren't aligned with our party, and in fact sometimes are hostile to our party, or are bending over backwards to prove to the right that they're not on the left. And so, of course, the message is going to get perverted. And so the point is that Democrats more broadly do have to embrace independent media, progressive media, because that's the only way the message is going to get to people in a way, both where people are watching, because more and more it's not even in traditional media outlets, it's not on legacy media, but beyond that, in a way that's going to be delivered how it's supposed to be delivered. I mean, I would consider myself an activist before anything else, and so I have a vested interest in making sure that the agenda I want to see passed gets passed. And so if I see a message that's good, I want to deliver that to people in the way that it's supposed to be delivered, instead of distorting it in a way that will bolster my journalistic bona fides, and look how I can be hostile to Democrats to show everybody how judicious I can be.
Yeah, well, I mean, I always think of this too, because it's like, you know what? Everyone knows that we're four former staffers of Barack Obama, so I'm not pretending anything.
Yeah.
But I think that I don't think that means that you can't deliver people information that is true and honest and factual and useful. You're part of this new, progressive, independent media infrastructure out there. What is your main goal when you're creating content every day, and who are you trying to reach?
So my goal is, and there's a reason that I'm on YouTube more than any other platform. My goal is just persuasion, and my goal is to this is actually a point that Dan Pfeiffer has made as well in his book, but the goal here is to both arm people who are watching my videos with useful tools that they can bring out to their circles. And I think the point is that the end audience, the people who are watching my videos aren't who I would perceive as being the end audience. My goal is so that everybody watching the videos can find one or two people beyond those who are just watching the video, and make those people your responsibility, and use what you heard in my video and in my videos, and when you listen or watch to Pod Save America or any other progressive media outlet, use that information to then reach other people and influence or persuade them. So really, if you're in a position where you're getting served my content, it's probably because you're bought in, you're on the left, or you're sympathetic to the cause. But the goal here can't just be that. It can't just be talking to the same people over and over and expecting that to somehow grow our coalition. The goal has to be persuasion, and has to be using the information that you hear to then be able to reach those one or two people in your lives. And that's really the goal in terms of what I'm doing.
Yeah, because it's funny. The most common question I always get from reporters about what we're doing is, aren't you just preaching to the choir? And, there's two different goals here. One is exactly what you're saying, right? Which is, we know that our audience is most likely already liberal, or going to vote for Democrats, or is anti-Trump at least. And so we want to arm them with information and messages that they can go use in their volunteering. But I do think, we spend a lot of time thinking at Crooked, how do we actually broaden the audience of people who, consume this content and engage with this content? And, you think about maybe one of the biggest divides in politics today isn't between people who consume a lot of progressive media and people who consume a lot of right-wing media. It's between people who follow politics closely at all and consume political coverage at all, and the majority of Americans who actually don't follow politics that closely. Have you thought about like how to reach those people?
Well, I think just by virtue of the sheer amount of content that I put out, hopefully each video brings in a few people. I mean, even reaching millions of people per day, the people who email me and say that I wasn't interested in politics before, before this year, I never voted before, those are the most impactful. That's really the point of being on YouTube and being able to reach so many people. It's that hopefully each video draws a few more people in, or that in some way I serve as a gateway for them to get to more progressive content, or from more conservative content into more like whatever it is. That is like in large part the goal, and you would hope that just by virtue of continuing to reach these people, that's the effect that it would have.
Yeah. Early on in the book, you write about having to endure a truly overwhelming amount of garbage from radical Republicans. How nasty has that gotten for you personally? Like, do you get crazy messages? What's
if only if only I could show you my inbox right now.
Is it really?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, you'll also get whiplash by looking at my email inbox, because one email will be like, "Thank you so much for what you do." I'll be like, "That's nice." And then I'll scroll to the next one, and it's like, "You should die now." I mean, it's horrid stuff. But you get kind of desensitized to it, and that comes with the breakdown of your mental health and everything.
Like
Eventually,
years of therapy.
Yeah, eventually you get really numb to all of it and everything, and but it's okay. I mean, like, at this point, I'll tell you, when I first started, I think I wrote some article back in 2017 about Trump's crowd size, and this was like early days. It was like the first article I ever wrote and put it online, and the torrential downpour of emails that I got, I almost quit after one day in politics. I was like, this is hell.
Triggering, huh?
Yeah, I was like, this is hell, and I think I'm gonna die. I think, and this was early days, and so like I mean, now I have to make sure that I have to take all these steps to make sure that my address isn't out there. But like, this was early days. The internet was like the wild, wild west in 2017, and anything went, and yeah.
People get nasty.
People get nasty, yeah.
You made a really great point, you talk about it in the book, about sort of Trump laying his hands on right-wing media, which is, he'll go on these shows not just because he can reach an audience through those shows, but because by him going on those shows, it legitimizes them and then builds the ecosystem. Talk about how on our side of this, you've seen that change over the years, because I think it's still not at a place where Trump and the right-wing media is, but it's getting better.
Yeah, I do think. I mean, look, I've had my interview series since 2020, since the summer of 2020, and it's increasingly easy to get people to come on the shows. I mean, to come on my show. I've seen also the progressive media ecosystem, especially in the last few months, really kind of blow up, and there's a lot more influencers, and they're getting people like Pete Buttigieg. They're getting people like, President Biden was doing a ton of like TikToks and stuff like that.
A lot of different outlets, a lot of different progressive outlets he did.
And he should, and like, that's exactly what
Some
they
he
should
didn't,
be doing.
you know.
So, well, it's weird that he didn't
weird,
wanna,
right?
Yeah, that's that one really, that was a real head scratcher. But I think you're gonna get that Biden interview any minute now.
After the debate, Brian walked into our office and sees me and Tommy. He's like, "Wow, you guys are really going for that Biden interview, huh? You guys are going hard for that one."
Yeah.
Didn't get it one of these days.
Yeah, one of these days.
But it is super important, and I don't think that people understand that it's not just the audience. It's that, like, if Joe Biden did this show or Kamala Harris did this show, then more people know what that show is, and then
Correct.
more people go there, and then it sort of broadens
More
the
people go
audience.
there, and now you have another platform where you have a host talking about progressive issues, talking about liberal issues, and it doesn't just help the people, because it doesn't just help the politicians, because now you're reaching people where they are, but it also validates yet another independent media platform, and validates another progressive media platform, and it grows our whole ecosystem. So those people are legitimized, those people are validated in the eyes of the viewers, because, well, if Biden's going to go on there, if Pete Buttigieg is going to go on there, if Jen or John and Tommy, if those guys are going to go on there, then this place must be legit, and so now I can get my news from there, and that's just one more outlet that just helps spread our message.
What'd you think of the convention?
I thought the convention, well, first of all, that was the first convention I'd ever been to, but I've watched the rest of them. Yeah. I thought it was fantastic. I mean, it showed two things. I think, one, it put on full display how Trump and Republicans really fucked up with the RNC, because, I mean, it was like somewhere in between kind of like a funeral and like a king's coronation. It was like a like a begrudging acceptance of like a totalitarian leader. I mean, it was real dark,
self-indulgent.
Self-indulgent, yeah. And that's because they were running against Biden, and Biden wasn't able to affirmatively prosecute the case against Trump, and so it was a testament to, like, we can just lean into the fascism if we want to, because, like, we're running against Biden, and he's not beating us in polls in New Mexico. And, like, if you're losing in New Mexico, you're not going to get to 270. And it gave an opening for Democrats to reclaim so many of the Republican branding points that they'd benefited for so long. You had more American flags at the DNC than the RNC. That's nuts. You had Democrats chanting USA, 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 and our vice presidential candidate is a Midwestern guy who wears camo.
There was an entire football team on stage.
I looked up at one point.
Very retired from high school football.
I looked up at one point, and a sheriff was up there.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And Adam Kinzinger and Jeff Duncan.
Yeah, it was real.
But good on them. Good on them, because
Bernie Sanders railing against billionaires, and then a billionaire,
and then J.B. Pritzker. Yeah, we had it all. But good on them, because the Republicans were so cocky when they were running against Biden that they didn't bother they didn't bother moving toward any semblance of a platform where their goal was to expand the coalition. It was just, let's double, triple, quadruple down on the base. Let's choose someone in J.D. Vance who is not a different religion or race or ethnicity. He's not from a battleground state. He's just Trump 2.0. He's a carbon copy of the guy. And yet the DNC was basically just scientifically engineered to expand our coalition. That was the whole point of it. It was giving a permission structure to everyone, from people who are fans of Bernie and AOC to people who listen to Jeff Duncan when he says, if you vote for Democrats, it doesn't make you a Democrat, it makes you a patriot. And it was... And so that disparity on full display was exactly the tone that we needed to hit.
So, Democrats, irrational exuberance or deservedly rational exuberance? What do you think?
I think it's the latter.
You think it's the latter?
Yeah, which is hard for me to say because you know, much like being Jewish, being a Democrat is just expecting the worst, you know?
I'm not expecting the worst. I'm just preparing for it and trying to avoid it. I think that's what we should, you know.
Well,
it's gonna.
If you were Jewish, you would expect the
worst. You know, Bill Clinton had a line in his speech that made me think of what we all do, which is he's like, next time Trump speaks, don't count the lies, count the eyes. And he basically is to make the point that Trump is so selfish, and the real, you know, the most effective message against Trump is, you know, he is someone who's only in it for himself and only cares about himself, and Kamala Harris is very much for the people. And I thought about that because we all spend a lot of time trying to, like, debunk Trump's lies. I think one of the lines after the debate with Biden was like, but look how many times he lied. And obviously there's like that's really important to do, but how do you think about sort of the balance between, you know, calling out his lies and calling out Republican lies, which a lot of the book is about, and not doing it so much that that's the only message, and it sort of crowds everything else out.
Yeah, I think there comes a point where it's clear. Well, I think it's a good question. I think there comes a point where it's clear that he's a liar, and so you don't want to just bring sand to the beach. And so you got to think about what's the most effective message at the point of time that you're in. I think right now, contrasting Trump with Harris in terms of who's going to actually work for you is going to be more effective because it's already baked in that Trump is a liar. And so there's messages that I think are going to be more important. That's one of them. Another one that I think is important right now is this idea that we spend a lot of time talking about how dangerous Donald Trump is, but I do think while that's very obviously true, what's also true right now is that more than focusing completely on how dangerous he is, there is also power in focusing on how weak he is. And I think that pointing that out that he's dangerous redounds to his benefit because it kind of lends itself to the idea that he's a strong man. But that's where he derives a lot of his power. He likes to be called a strong man. And so us saying, look how dangerous he is, look how scary he is, that feeds him. And so us pointing out that in fact, he's dude's a moron. Like, he's an idiot. He thinks Nikki Haley was in charge of the Capitol on January 6th. That's important. And so I've taken to this to pointing out more and more that he is a confused, illiterate idiot. And he spends more, he's made it a part of his stump speech that Hannibal Lecter is a great American and that...
Yeah. I mean, I thought that Kamala Harris squared the circle on this really well in her speech, where she said Donald Trump is an unserious man, but electing him can have very serious consequences.
Yeah.
And I think that when we talk about him, you can do both, right? You can talk about the consequences as very serious, but you can't call him a serious man because he's not, right? So.
And I think we're looking at that, and when we've leaned into this idea that actually he's a joke, I think how he reacts to it is
he hates that.
He hates it, and it's causing him to completely dissemble, and we're seeing that right now. Like when he realizes he's behind, he kind of reverts back to what worked in 2016, which is, okay, let's just get the cameras on me and I'll fix it. Only I can fix it. Like, we'll just get the cameras on me. The cameras were on me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in 2016. I got elected, so I've been conditioned to believe that that's all I need to do, and I'll just say some crazy shit, and that's step one. Step two is just, I'll get elected president. And
more Trump, the better.
More Trump, the better.
People want more Trump.
And so instead, what he does is he ends up on stage at the National Association of Black Journalists and denies Kamala Harris's biraciality when the exact demographic group that he has to go after are people of color. Yeah. And then his next event was the Mar-a-Lago press conference. What did he do at the Mar-a-Lago press conference?
What didn't he do?
He said that he bragged that his January 6th insurrection crowd was bigger than Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech crowd. I could just see
with a shot of honey bunches of oats and some other groceries. Just in front of his golf club, talking about inflation. It was just a great message.
Rotting meat behind him.
Yeah, a lot of rotting meat.
So I've actually come around because I was of the mind that Donald Trump we were heaping too much attention onto him previously, but now I'm like, let dude talk.
I think that's why the Harris-Walz campaign wants to make sure that the mics at the next debate are on the entire time, because it's more Trump, the better.
They're like, make sure he has an unlimited supply of Diet Cokes. Keep him awake and caffeinated.
Yeah, what he spoke today at the National Guard conference in Detroit.
It was
I was like, who gave him the horse tranquilizer?
It was like
we need.
It was
more
like
Diet Coke.
It was like a melatonin commercial. It was wild. It should have come. It should have come with a warning not to operate heavy machinery while you're watching.
So before we take questions, you end the book with this great story about your mom. And you say that your mom has never really followed politics closely. In fact, doesn't usually vote, hadn't voted.
She hadn't voted her entire life.
And even when you were had your YouTube show, had your stuff, and were like posting videos, and you were into this, and you were trying to get her to pay attention, and she still was resisting.
I would have better luck convincing the sun to rise at night than convincing my Jewish mother from Brooklyn to do anything against her will.
But she finally voted in 2020. Can you tell the story of how that came about?
Yeah, so again, like I had been trying for years to explain to her, I mean, my mom is a labor and delivery nurse, and goes to work 13-hour shifts at the hospital, and I'm sitting here like doe-eyed explaining to her how important it is to be involved in civic duty and climate change, and she's like, fuck this, I have to get up for work at 5 o'clock in the morning, I don't have time for any of this shit. By the way, that was the exact quote. That's not the quote. That's not the quote she would let me put in the book.
I was gonna say I didn't see that in the book.
No, this is the real quote was, fuck that shit. I have to get up for work in the morning. I don't have time for this shit. And I actually asked her permission like somewhere around, so the book has, you write the book and you submit it, and then you get like a first pass and a second pass and maybe a third pass, and then it goes into print. And I asked her, I was like, maybe I should ask her after the second pass if it's okay that I use these quotes, and I told her, and she's like, if you fucking use those, no, she's like, it's not okay. So that was quickly rectified. But in any case, she, she never voted for 60 years, and I gave up trying to proselytize her because it was, I would spend all my time doing that other than just reaching out to everybody else. And I got a text during the 2020 election, and it was a picture of her at the Dropbox in my hometown in New Jersey. And I know I was writing this and I was worried because I'm like, this seems so it seems so ridiculous to be like, and here's my accomplishment. I got my own mom to vote. But it was because this is not an easy person to convince to do anything. And so, but in any case, it just shows that even if I am able to reach a lot of people through my YouTube videos, just knowing that I was actually able to impact the vote, the specific vote of one or two people, getting emails like that where it's like somebody who said, I wouldn't have voted in this election or I hadn't voted before. Those are actually the most impactful, even if it's somebody that gave birth to me. So.
All right. On that note, I think we have time for some questions.
We do. I'm here. I have a mic, but I want to start the questions off. I'm taking prerogative. Brian told me when he got here, when I congratulated him for the book landing on the bestseller list, the New York Times bestseller list at #1, that he kicked J.D. Vance out of that slot. Okay, so this is a softball, Brian. Talk to us about that feeling when you bounced.
Well, I immediately...
Back to the couch.
I'll tell you what I did. I immediately went to the closest donut shop, and... yeah, that was a really nice feeling. I think it's good, too, because it one thing that Donald Trump did really well was he pointed to a lot of books about him, and he promoted them, and I think that bolstered the right-wing ecosystem, their authors, in terms of, if I write a book about somebody on the right, it'll get promoted by somebody on the right. If I write a book about Trump, it'll get promoted by Trump. And so there's a lot of incentive structure on the right to write these books because they get promoted by people on the right. And so it's the same thing as the rest of the progressive media ecosystem. To see stuff on the left do well, I hope serves the purpose of giving more of an incentive structure for progressive or democratic authors to see that and say, okay, let's write more books. There's obviously an audience for that. And so, it's a huge testament to our audience out there to hopefully give a kick in the ass to other progressive authors to keep writing.
Okay, so I'm on this side right now, and then I'll make my way over there because there's only one mic. All right, I'm going to go to this guy right here.
Hey, Brian. Nice to meet you.
You too.
Pleasure being here. Congratulations on your book again.
Thank you.
Being that I wasn't political, I became political looking at your videos and all that, and I just couldn't do it anymore. The left, the right, all of that stuff, it got me like down, and I stopped. What do you do to comfort yourself or to get your mind off of it and to ease it, being that you do it every day?
Oh boy. Oh, I think you asked the wrong person that question. Well, I think, so this is not what I would do, but this is what I would recommend, is just to take the time off that you need. I mean, I can't because for my job, I have to always stay on top of it, even when I do feel it tearing away at the shreds of my mental health and sanity. but generally, I mean, just taking time off so that it doesn't feel like you're immersed in something. I mean, I think politics is fun. I love politics. I'm passionate about it. But just like with anything, if you get too much of it, it can lose its appeal. So take the time that you need off from it, so that it doesn't lose that that appeal that it has.
I mean, I also think that doing politics in person is one way to make yourself feel better about it, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, going out there and persuading people who don't agree with you, but just like being among people who are like-minded and talking to politics with them, it gives you a different feeling than just being online all the time and consuming it that way, or watching TV all the time. I mean, I was just thinking, like last week at the convention, I love at the convention because we're out here in LA, we do our podcast, right? We see each other once in a while, but like seeing a whole bunch of people, thousands of people at that convention and getting to like talk to people about politics in person, it just gives you this like happier, more fulfilled feeling than just like being by yourself and like looking at the screen all day.
Hi, Brian. Great to meet you. I really appreciate the Democracy Docket segments of your show and your efforts to inform people about election deniers' plans to block certification. So despite how scary all that stuff is, are you optimistic that the Democrats are on top of that?
Yes. So I do that series with Mark Elias, who is a hero. A lot of this, everything held up when we didn't know that it was coming in 2020. Now we know everything that's coming. Mark Elias himself is now on Kamala Harris's senior legal team. We have, I think, a legal team that's 10 times the size of the legal team on the right, and the legal team on the right is just full of, it's a band of misfits of people who keep getting disbarred in different jurisdictions. So look,
if we lose, it will not be for lack of lawyers.
Yeah, that's right.
That's for sure.
So look, the usual caveats apply that anything can happen, and we do have a Supreme Court that has been overtly hostile to democracy. But at the same time, this is the same Supreme Court that refused to hear the Texas lawsuit in 2020 that sought to invalidate the election results in 4 other states. It's the same Supreme Court. So, cautiously optimistic in terms of the legal stuff.
Hey guys.
Hi.
What do you think are the key drivers causing people to lose faith in democratic institutions and thus being open to these nihilistic post-truth populists like Trump and Farage? We might not necessarily understand this because we haven't lost that trust, but they fall into the hands of these people. Why do you think that is?
So, look, I think there's a number of like sort of broader socioeconomic factors, right? I think you can go back as far as like the beginning of globalization to realize like wealth inequality and just sort of rapidly changing culture, mass immigration, right? There's all these factors, but I think what has supercharged it over the last couple decades is sort of the way that we consume information. And I think that the fact that we get most of our information online, and I don't just think that it is misinformation, disinformation is a huge part of this, but I think it's something deeper than that, which is this technology that was supposed to bring us together has instead really pushed us apart and made us even lonelier in a way. And I think there's been sort of social alienation and isolation. And so if you live in a community that has sort of been left behind by globalization, then what do you see every day? On your screen, you see images and videos of celebrities and people who are wealthy and all kinds of people just living these great lives, right? And when you interact with people online, again, like we were talking about, you also have these algorithms that are sort of driving you towards content that makes you more afraid, more angry, more envious of other people. And when you can't see the person that you're arguing with in real life, you tend to sort of, it makes dehumanizing that person easier. And I think all of this sort of redounds to the benefit of strongmen, autocrats, dictators, who have like been able to hold sway and whip people up over centuries. But I just think it is easier now in the information environment we're in, and that's why, look, we see it here with Trump, but of course we've seen it in Europe, we've seen it in South America, we've seen it all over the world. And I think that trying to get past this moment is going to be figuring out how we interact with one another, and in a way where like we can debate, we can disagree, we might not even come to like some kind of common understanding, but we can at least figure out a way to live together in relative peace and prosperity. Because if we can't figure that out, then the people like Trump and the people like Orban and people like Bolsonaro, right, they are going to be able to, they have the easier job here, right? Which is to say, if this democracy is not working for you, what has it really done for you? And all your problems are the fault of people who don't look like you or speak like you or come from where you do. And you know what, if it's not working, I'm just gonna go in there and blow the whole thing up. That's the easy message, right? Our job is much harder, because our job is trying to prove that democracy can actually deliver in a way that improves people's lives. And to do that requires patience and understanding and empathy and grace, and all of that is so much harder in a world where so many people are struggling. So, people say, it's harder for Democrats, harder for liberals, progressives. It's just a tougher job that we have, because it's really easy to burn down the barn, but it's much harder to build.
Okay. One more from over here, and then I'm moving to another part of the theater.
And by the way, if you're interested in hearing more stuff like that, offline, John's show Offline is very much along those same lines. If you haven't yet subscribed to that.
Yeah, it's a show about how to be less online from someone who is completely addicted. So.
Hi guys. About 8 weeks ago, we were all really depressed, ready to slit our wrists, some of us. And it's my understanding that Nancy Pelosi went to the Oval Office and basically told Joe, you have no way of winning this damn thing at this point, and so you need to leave, and we can do this the easy way or the hard way. I'm seeing like no coverage of exactly what went on behind the scenes, and we're all just saying he magnanimously stepped down. What's your understanding of what actually transpired there?
Well, no. Nancy Pelosi did not actually go to the Oval Office, despite all the reporting. I think she did have a call with Biden. There was a report that she had a call with Biden at one point where he said, no, there's a path to victory, and I'm seeing it in some of the polls. And then she said, put Mike Donilon on the phone. I want to hear about the polls. And Mike Donilon was Joe Biden's sort of chief advisor, message, strategy, polling. Now, later Pelosi said that she didn't actually say put Donilon on the phone, but it was reported many different places. Yeah. Anyway, I think that the best reporting we have from the Times, from the Post, from other places like that, is that it was Mike Donilon and Steve Ricchetti, another close advisor, who finally came to Biden in that final weekend and sort of laid out how difficult the path ahead would be. And because I think that there was a New York Times report that even as late as Friday night, Biden had talked to Ron Klain, his former chief of staff, and Ron finished that conversation thinking that Biden would continue. And so I think it was like between literally like Friday night and Saturday, when Donald and Ricchetti came, that Biden sort of slept on it and woke up and thought, like, really sort of got into the polling. And I think when we talk about the polling, it's not just like, oh, a few bad polls here and there. Like they, we just talked to the Biden-Harris Battleground States Director, Dan Cannon, and Dan Pfeiffer actually asked him, like, do you guys have confidence in the data and the polling you're doing? The difference between what campaigns do on polling and what you see in public polls is like campaigns, and this was true as far back as the Obama campaign in 2008, we call like thousands of voters a night in the swing states, right? So it's not just like you see a poll with a sample of 600 people, right? The campaigns pay for like really deep research, thousands of voters, and I think that by the time that Biden dropped out, I think that it wasn't just he was losing just about every swing state by like 3, 4, 5, 6 more points. I mean, you were seeing, New Mexico close and Virginia close and Minnesota close, right? And it was just an entirely different scenario than pre-debate where Biden was down, but down by a margin that you could imagine a candidate overcoming by the fall. And I think it was so bad that he realized and understood that if he stayed in, maybe he still thought he could win, but I think that the party, and particularly members of Congress who had their own internal polling, just saw that it was getting so bad in their districts that he would have lost, and also we would have lost the House and probably lost the Senate as well. So
there was also polling that showed where they would ask the same respondents whether they would support the Senate candidates and the president, and you would have I think the latest poll that Biden was still in the race showed Bob Casey in Pennsylvania up like 8 points and Joe Biden down 5. And so you have 13-point differentials between the Senate candidate and the president of the same party and that kind of stuff. Because a regular poll you can just write off as like, oh, well, you don't know like what the pollster's doing. But if they're asking these people, will you vote for Bob Casey? Will you vote for Joe Biden? Will you vote for Ruben Gallego? Will you vote for Joe Biden? Tammy Baldwin, Joe Biden. And the difference is like 7, 8, 9 points between all of these people. Then it becomes clear that the albatross around Democrats' necks is Biden.
Yeah.
Okay, over here.
I'm wondering, we haven't heard much from the Republican scream queens, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Mace, and Boebert. Have they been gagged? Told not to...
Are you accusing the Republicans of censorship?
I am just wondering if, and we haven't heard from any of those types.
I think they probably, somebody up there recognizes that they are not good for Republican prospects at winning any elections. I mean, Marjorie Taylor Greene did a great job of making herself basically the face of the Republican Party. All of these people did. And when you have these MAGA people who just continue to bubble up to the top, it's not helping their brand at all. And in fact, if you look at, I believe it was the 2022 midterms, when these people the people who got the most coverage, Herschel Walker, Dr. Oz, Carrie Lake, Doug Mastriano, all those people lost. They actually underperformed the rest of the Republicans who ran in these elections. And so maybe there's some begrudging acceptance that the more you elevate the crazies to the top of the party, the more it hurts the Republicans. But then again, they're running Trump, so what do I know?
Hi, Brian. Hi, John.
Hey, Alex.
And congratulations. We're so proud of you, number
Thank
one.
you. Fox LA's Alex Michelson.
Thank you. So basically, now the race is back to where it should be, right? It's basically a 50-50 race. And the question is, what's the message to get your mom in the swing state? What is the message to get these people that may be deciding between voting and the couch, and we're not talking about J.D. Vance's couch, right? How do you get them? What is that short, concise message that you guys were able to do so well in 2008, John, for this electorate in this media environment to convince those people?
I do think it's that when you talk to voters who are open to voting for Trump and open to voting for Kamala Harris, and who might not vote for either, right? This is sort of the group that we're talking about here. They, especially recently since Kamala Harris has been the nominee, they'll say things like, well, I wasn't going to vote for Biden. I'm definitely open to her now, but I feel like I don't know enough about her, and I don't know what she stands for, and I don't know what she'll do. And, you know, I see the media making a big deal of her, and everyone's really excited, and it's all this excitement, but like, is it real? What's she actually gonna do? They have mostly made up their minds about Donald Trump, but they've made up their minds on him based on his character. Most of them do not like him. The ones who are open to voting for him will say things like, I don't like him, I think he's really annoying, I'm exhausted by him, but maybe I liked some of his policies, maybe things were better when he was president. They have this fake, I heard one focus group voter say, you know, maybe I'll just vote for Donald Trump, turn off the TV for the next 4 years, and just enjoy the Trump economy. That's what they were. Yeah, that was when Biden, it was still Trump and Biden. So those are the kind of voters, and so when you know that that's the universe, right, of voters that you're trying to reach, I do think that the message from Kamala Harris that I am going to fight for you. I have fought for people my entire life when I was, and you know, she had a great number of proof points during her convention speech. She talked about being Attorney General of California and taking on the big banks. And when they had the homeowner settlement, she, you know, kept pushing the Obama administration for more money for homeowners who were defrauded, and she helped veterans who were defrauded and college students who were defrauded. So I think she has this record of fighting for people. And then I think we've heard her put out policies about bring down the cost of housing, child tax credit, middle class tax cut. Like, I think that I'm for you and Donald Trump is only for himself. And by the way, if he gets another term, here are some of the things he's planning. And even if he says he's not planning these things, he's gonna have this group of people around him, Project 2025, and you have to ask yourself, like, of course Donald Trump will do whatever people around him tell him to do, not because he's weak, but because if it helps him, Donald Trump will do it, right? And this is why, for example, he, you know, did he care that much about overturning Roe v. Wade? Doesn't really matter. He's the one who selected the 3 Supreme Court justices that did it because he thought that would be politically advantageous for him. So whatever is politically advantageous for Trump, or advantageous in terms of like helping him stay out of jail or make more money, like he's probably going to do. And so the basic message there is, this guy's for himself, he only cares about himself, he's only gonna help himself, he's only gonna use power to help himself, and Kamala Harris has a history of using it to help other people, and that's what she's gonna do as president.
We have time for a few more questions. And in all the years I've been doing Writer's Block, I have to say, I don't think I remember so many audience questions, so much, you know, engagement. So here, bear with me, we have questions.
Hi guys, I love both of you. I watch and listen every day. I'm here with my daughter. It's the first time she's going to vote this year.
Oh, amazing.
Trying to get her engaged. I'm very informed. I watch and listen all the time. I have my points, I have my facts. I know you guys always say, go out and talk to the people that are in your community, around you and your family, and get them to vote. So I got all my information. I was ready. I was at a family gathering, brought up the information, and they look at me like I'm crazy. Like, why are you bringing politics into this? How do I talk to people close to me who aren't informed and get them informed to vote without coming off like that crazy person, just making them pay attention?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's tough, right? Because we've all been there. Because we're all crazy. I think that sometimes the best approach is, you know, have you paid much attention to the election? Crazy campaign. Have you been following the news at all? And they'll probably say no, or maybe just a little bit. And then I do think it sounds trite, but asking them, like, what's bothering you? What do you care about? What issues would make you vote? What issues do you vote on? And then really, like, listening to their concerns and what they care about, and so, like, you know, you got all your points and your information and all that and your fact checks and all that, but just like, yeah, keeping those close to the vest for a while you have a conversation with them, just like a normal person, right? And figure out what's on their mind, and then try to use that as a way in to talk about politics. Because I do think when we come to people as, as Democrats or liberals, or watch out, Donald Trump is so scary and you've got to vote or else we're going to lose democracy. Like it's hard to start that way. And so I think that people appreciate when you hear them, when you listen to them. Like I have plenty of family members who are Republican, conservative, and at family gatherings, I'm usually not the first one to talk about politics. They usually start talking to me about politics, and I always take the posture of I'm just going to listen, and if they want to yell about Barack Obama or yell about politics or whatever, I'm just going to let them do it, and then I'm going to find out why they're saying that, and are there any points of commonality, and are there any issues that they care about where we might be on the same side, and then I kind of just go that way. And look, it doesn't always work. It doesn't even often work. But every once in a while, you can start making some inroads with folks, and that's how you eventually get Brian's mom to vote.
It's a great point though. I have conservative friends, long-standing friends, and I know what issues they care about. I know what issues are just dying on the wrong hill, but I know what issues they care about, and that's the stuff that I talk to them about frequently. And sometimes it won't work, but sometimes I know that it resonates, and it's gonna not be something that I'm gonna expect to do in one fell swoop. But if I can work on somebody for a long time, maybe I can get them to vote from straight Republican ticket to not voting for a Republican this time, or voting for a moderate Democrat, whatever it is. But I know certain issues, and so I'll cater my arguments to specific people for whatever the issue is that they care about.
Hi, my name is David, and I'm looking forward to reading your book. So
Thanks.
That'll be awesome. So 2 questions. First of all, do you ever sleep?
No, not enough.
And what do you do for your mental health? I mean, because you do this so often and every day, and how do you take care of yourself?
I don't take care of myself. Well, I do have my dog, and I love my dog.
Yeah.
Austin. That poor dog is just like the receptacle of just so much love and so there's that. I also try to go to the gym, although it's been a minute. But yeah, I mean it's something I'm very much looking forward to December. Well, I guess I would be looking forward to when the insurrection's scheduled for January.
I was going to say post. We got to do post-insurrection.
So probably like mid-January after the.
You don't want to be scheduling any vacations for December and January.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. Speaking of scheduling vacations, I worked 100 days straight, and I was and then a couple weeks back I was like, I'm gonna just take a weekend, go to Palm Springs, go visit some friends in Palm Springs, and so it was Saturday. I got in the car and I shot a bunch of videos the previous day, worked 14 hours the previous day, got a bunch of videos stacked for the weekend, and got in my car, drove to Palm Springs. I was in the car for 2 hours. I was about 15 minutes away, and then my phone started blowing up because somebody tried to kill Donald Trump. And I was like, God damn it. It was like the thing I joke about where it's like, well, I'll be able to go unless somebody tries to assassinate the president, And they fucking did it.
I had the exact same. I had a very similar experience where my wife and 2 kids were away. They were still in Maine at my in-laws, and I had gotten home, and I was like, this is the real vacation now. And it's like, it's just me, And I'm like, all right, the debate stuff, everything else, I'm like, I took Twitter off my phone. And I went to one of my favorite places, The Grove. and I walked around, and I was
big Rick Caruso shout out
here. Big Rick Caruso, yeah. And I'm sitting there, and I'm having a cocktail at 4:00 because it's a Saturday afternoon, and this is my only day off. And then fucking Tommy texts me, and he was like, are you watching television right now? Did you see Donald Trump's been shot? I was like, fuck. And I just put everything down, got in my car, went home, and I was just by myself staring at the.
If you had been driving behind me on whatever road it is to Palm Springs, you would think that the person in the driver's seat just passed out. The car was all over the road. The first text I got was Trump assassinated. And I thought it was a joke, and then I got a lot more texts, and so me on Twitter going 80 miles an hour on my way to Palm Springs,
That's
and
safe.
just like, it was almost two near deaths that day.
Yeah.
Hey guys, my question is more for John. It's about speechwriting. I love the Democratic Convention as you guys did, and was noticing that it felt like a lot of the speakers hit the same themes, and they also sort of took down Trump in the same way. They were, like you were talking about, they sort of made him seem small, and there seemed to be a unity about it. And I wondered, is there a head speechwriter? Excuse me, is there a head speechwriter? Does anybody look over all those speeches and try to make sure they don't tell the same stories or that they hit the same themes?
That's a good question.
It's a great question. So there's a speechwriting room at the convention with some of the best speechwriters in the party, and basically, so if you're an elected official who has a speechwriter, then they'll work with you and write your speech, and then you try to send the speech to the speechwriters room so they can figure out timing, which they do their best. So how long the speech is, and so they can take a look at it to see if it reflects the overall message. But a lot of elected officials and a lot of people who speak don't have their own speechwriters, and so in those cases, the room will, you'll get assigned to a different speechwriter, and then they'll work with you on the speech. But in terms of thematics, they have direction from the Harris campaign about broad themes. But I do think that the reason everyone ended up on a similar theme is just because sort of the way, it's just through osmosis, right? Everyone's reading the news, they're consuming a lot of content, they all have staffers that are talking to each other, saying the same thing. And so I think it just happens in a much more organic way than you might imagine, than it's planned, But for example, I know Obama obviously in his speech took on Trump as a clown and a fool, and I'm friends with the person who worked on Kamala Harris's speech, and he was he worked with me in the White House. He was my first hire in the Obama campaign, and we were talking about that, and he was like, she thinks he's unserious, but she is genuinely worried about the threat of Donald Trump and does want to talk about the consequences of a second term. And so, as we heard, she sort of laid that out in her speech. So it really just depends on the speaker, and if, when you have elected officials who care deeply about their speeches and are involved heavily in writing of the speeches, which is Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Kamala Harris, Doug Emhoff is like that as well, just off the AOC, right? This is just Bill Clinton for sure. They're going to say what they want to say, even if it's not necessarily on the exact message of the campaign, which is a good thing, which is what we should want in our, public officials, is that they sort of speak from the heart. So it's an organic process with just sort of broad guardrails, I would say.
Well, we could go on for hours and hours because there are 40 people that want to ask questions, but we can't because the theater is going to kick me out. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and the best audience ever with so many questions. Brian, huge congratulations, huge thanks. And John, I need to have you on speed dial. You're so great. Anyway, thank you. Book Soup has some books available that are already signed, so buy them because you're going to go somewhere for Labor Day. Get them as presents and stuff like that.
So a big thank you to Andrea and Writer's Block. Thank you so much for hosting.
Thank you.
And thank you to John. I very much appreciate it. And thank you all. Thank you all so much for coming and taking time out of your day.
Go buy Shameless.
I appreciate it. Thank you.